Well, welcome to the first of 3 free online events, the Climate Risk Reduction Showcase of Bay Area Solutions. We're really, really glad that you're here. My name is Annie Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Together Bay Area. But what I really want you to know about me is that I love the view from Taylor Mountain, from the top of Taylor Mountain. I love the bread at Wildflower Bakery, and I love the sound of the waves crashing at Doran Beach. There's a whole lot of amazing places in the North Bay that are pretty special and pretty great, and that I also want you to know that I was born and raised in the Bay Area, and I love this place, maybe just like you. So as we gather here today for this event, I invite you to take a breath and arrive here and be here. Let's all get grounded. Wherever you are, however you're zooming in today, we are all on Indigenous land. Together Bay Area and our members are working in a whole lot of ways with both heart work and mind thinking work to go beyond land acknowledgements.
Yes.
And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, I invite you to check out our Right Relations program, which will be dropped in the link in just a second, or in the chat. A link will be dropped in the chat. And I also invite you to check out the program from our 2024 Together conference, which was held this past May in person at Fort Mason. There were a lot of things about both the Right Relations program and about our conference that highlight some of the ways that we're going beyond land acknowledgements, and just really excited for that work. So we're here today to learn and to get inspired. I want to tell you very quickly that Together Bay Area is a coalition of organizations working for healthy lands, healthy people, and healthy communities. There are a lot of folks who work for our members who are here today, and I welcome all of you. There's a very large network of professionals and practitioners all working together. And if you don't work for one of our members, I want you to know that there's a lot of work happening, a lot of coordination. That's really exciting. One of the things that we're working on as a coalition is supporting Proposition 4, which is on the ballot this November, or in your ballot that you might have just received yesterday or today for the November 5th election. Proposition 4 is a bond measure across the state that's a $10 billion climate bond that tackles some of the most urgent issues that the state faces and most urgent climate needs today before the damage gets too costly. So this is really about preventative instead of responding to the impacts later. Prop 4 includes almost $1 billion for the State Coastal Conservancy, which is a critical funding partner and funding agency and partner to a lot of on-the-ground organizations and public agencies in the Bay Area. I haven't mapped this exactly to know this for sure, but my hunch is that you could drive for 30 minutes in any direction in the Bay Area and you would see some kind of new park, improved, restored wetlands or restored lands, or other kinds of really innovative projects that the Coastal Conservancies fund. Like, their impact is really everywhere. And if Prop 4 is passed, it will make a big difference here in the Bay Area. From dealing with extreme heat, which feels particularly relevant over the past, since what we've been experiencing the past week, to catastrophic wildfires and clean drinking water. There's a lot of work that will happen here on the ground, both in the North Bay as well as across the entire region if Prop 4 passes. So today, what we're going to do is showcase some projects that Together Bay Area members are leading that Prop 4 could help make happen. So I invite you to sit back, eat your lunch if that's what you're doing at this time, and enjoy a showcase of solutions. Listen, take notes, and ask questions in the chat. Leading today's event will be Jessica Little. She's my colleague, and she has decades of experience in policy and advocacy work in Sacramento. And she really knows her stuff. And while she's living and working in Sacramento, I like to believe that her heart is here in the Bay Area. And so with that, I welcome Jess Eka to the stage.
Thank you, Annie. And yes, while I am living and raising my family in Sacramento, I spent many of my formative years in the Bay Area, like some of you. I spent a lot of my time on the banks of the Bay Delta and perusing, adventuring on the trails of the Point Reyes National Seashore. So I do love the Bay Area. It's my backyard, and I'm really glad to be here with you all today. So that's really enough about me. I'm really excited for you to learn more about just 3 of the very many projects that are happening in the Bay Area to build climate resilience. And I want you to know that over the past couple of years, Together Bay Area has asked members and partners about the projects that they are doing that would benefit the region and could benefit from something like Proposition 4 that's on the ballot this November. What we learned most recently is that the region alone has $1.2 billion worth of projects that would help build climate resilience in the area. There was over 155 projects submitted, and they had a beautiful range of different types of projects, from wetland restoration to park building and wildfire prevention. So today I'm excited to help you learn more about just 3 of those very many projects that are happening across the Bay Area. Okay, so speaking of those stories, today we're going to start at the Petaluma River, where there's a new park that's going to be created. And if you guessed, like me, that the Petaluma River runs through the town of Petaluma, you're right, A+. So with that, I'd like to welcome Seair Lorentz up to the stage. She is the executive director of the Petaluma River Park Foundation. She's born and raised in Petaluma, and she is working on a grassroots effort to build and develop a new riverfront park in the heart of the city. Welcome, Seair.
Thanks so much, Jessica. It's wonderful to be here with everyone online and together with Together Bay Area. Had the pleasure of joining the conference earlier in the spring. And just want to give a shout out to the incredible work that this organization does to really break down silos between organizations and conservation efforts and environmental efforts throughout the Bay Area and bring people together on common ground. It's fantastic and really important work. So honored to be here. I'm really excited to talk about a little bit about our project and to put our support behind the passing of Prop 4. Obviously self-serving, as it will assist in our small project here in our smaller little portion of the Bay Area, but its ability to really bring so much needed funding and good to this across the state to prepare us as best we can for the changes up ahead regarding climate. Really important. So happy to be here. Okay, so the Petaluma River Park is a project, as Jessica mentioned, in Petaluma, California. We are in Sonoma County, just north of Marin County, in the southern part of Sonoma County on the 101. And our project here, you can see this is an aerial shot of the general region. If you go to the next slide for me. This project really did start around the kitchen table, as a lot likes to say, although it was COVID days, so it was outside at the patio table, 6 feet apart. But the conversation, there was land for sale here in the city, and it was already zoned as Parks and Rec, or for Parks and Recreation, and therefore was priced accordingly for that market, which was rather inexpensive based on Bay Area real estate standards. And a group of folks here in town got around that patio table and said, oh my gosh, there's 24 acres of open space surrounded by the river. This really needs to be put back into the community's hands and become a place for all. And what started as a fun little, or an idea around making a park, really grew kind of broader in its ambition as the opportunity inherent in this site in this moment in time was revealed. The city had already incorporated, with funding from the State Coastal Conservancy back in the 90s, a broad vision for the transition of the river frontage here in our city from the private sector. It had been used for industry for the last 150 years, and a return to the public sphere. And this is something we're seeing across the country, where waterfronts, as they're deindustrialized and we're moving into a different era, are being put back into the public's hands with public access, and then obviously the restoration of these waterways, which is so a restoration and long-term care, which is so desperately needed. So we were happy to find out that 25 years previously, folks had the same notion around this really special piece of land. It was created actually from dredge spoils back in the 1850s with help from Chinese laborers at the time. And there's really a rich cultural history, along with a really interesting ecological history here in the Petaluma River Valley. Humans have lived in this space for over 9,000 years. And the river has been both the symbolic and physical and economic through line and thread of this region for essentially all of human history here. So it's a great honor and privilege to be returning this into the public space and inviting all members to enjoy the benefits of the river. Go to the next slide for us. The mission of the Petaluma River Park is to create a shared space that connects people, art, and nature. It is a conservation project. It is a park making project, but it's also an attempt to build cultural commons and public space here within the city. If you skip to the next slide. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we are trying to create a new place, a new outdoor place that is connected with our environmental and cultural history here in the city, and puts people back in touch with nature, and ultimately bringing the community together around creativity and connection for generations to come. Next slide. And one of the good news is that we had the great privilege. We acquired the first piece of property in 2020, November of 2020, and we're able to pretty immediately, remember November of 2020, it was a little bleak. And we were able to immediately open the land up to the public, because if anything COVID taught us was, dear God, do we need our parks and open space and our connection with nature for our health and basic sanity, essentially. And so we were able to open the park to the public and installed a basic trail a couple of years ago. And we're already seeing that usership, the visitorship at the park just skyrocket, as people are so hungry to get out into place and to have access to the river in this regard. Next slide for me. Just to give you a little bit of context for those not in the region, this is this small yellow oval here in Petaluma. The peninsula, the park site is in the middle of the city of Petaluma. And we are the most northern tributary of the broader San Francisco Bay, flowing through the San Pablo Bay. And actually this stretch of marsh, the Petaluma marshland, my understanding is it's the least touched and the most preserved portion of baylands throughout the entire San Francisco Bay. And a lot of ecologists and others come to study it to understand what the kind of the native state of the baylands could be. And so we are a portion of that system, but within the center of the city. And if you go to the next slide, one of the real opportunities that we have is that we are a natural oasis in the heart of the city. We are literally at the core of the city of Petaluma, adjacent from our main bus stop, from the SMART train, which is our little engine that I hope can continue to make progress with getting people out of their cars and into climate smart public transportation here in the North Bay. And we are at the center between the east and west side of Petaluma, with, if anybody here is local knows that there's a bit of a schism between the east and west side, and always has been. So this idea that there's both a physical and symbolic center. The other really important component in terms of conservation is that the parklands are now around 65 acres in the heart of the city. And we have other large scale parks, but they're all on the fringes. They all require cars to get there. This park will be sizable, substantial, open space that people can walk and bike or take easy public transportation to anytime. And so really giving people access, those that face barriers to large scale nature right in the heart of the city. So the project is simultaneously open space preservation, conservation, habitat creation, as well as an urban park. Really trying to bring up that next generation of conservationists, which we all know starts with a connection and a love for nature. So doing our part in that regard. I will also take a moment to just say that the park also sits at the nexus of a series of regional trail systems, including the Bay Area Ridge Trail and the Water Trail. And, you know, I've come to understand Petaluma is a bit of a problem child in connecting these larger regional trails. We have some difficult terrain and routes. And so this will create a riverfront trail system in the core, the urban core of the city, which will then enable folks to travel through even more easily. Next slide. I'll speak just a bit of where we are to date. We are simultaneously an open park. I mentioned that the Peninsula property is open dawn to dusk daily, operating as a park. And then we are also deep in a development process for construction, for constructing the final vision for the park. I mentioned that the peninsula itself and the other mainland side, it's actually been adulterated quite a bit throughout the last 150 years. Mud moved around. So we're dredge spoils with a bunch of invasive grasses on it is what really exists today, with a little bit of emergent tidal marsh and pretty unhealthy riparian and upland habitat. And so we're midstream on a planning process to accomplish a grander vision for what a rehabilitated and transformed park site would look like. To the tune of somewhere around 800 trees being planted, about 3.5 acres of tidal marsh restored, and then you know, riparian environments also fortified and taken into account. We've had some good success to date, in particular bringing private sector or, you know, individual contributions to the acquisition of the park site, and then really our project was catalyzed by a grant from the State Coastal Conservancy. And Annie, I think, mentioned them earlier in her remarks there. They delivered a planning grant to our project, and that has really been supporting our planning work. And in particular, in one area, they're exceptional partners, is around our work with the community. The project from the get-go is grassroots, as I described, and we're really focused on making sure the community is at the helm here, and in particular that folks are at the table that have historically been excluded from park making and participation in park processes. Next slide for me. This is just quickly kind of where we're at in our process. We're just wrapping up our Dream It phase, and we'll be moving into design development. And then into construction with the intention of opening the reimagined river park in June of 2028. You can skip forward. And I'll just, I mentioned earlier that the community-led process, which we're so happy to have the Conservancy's support on, this was what was produced. We spent about a year working very intimately with community, and landed on these 12 guiding principles of what our community and wants this park to be, and how it can help us in our kind of broader goals for a healthy society moving forward. And I'm not going to read all of them, but these are now our constellation of North Stars, we like to say, that'll both guide the organization's operations, park development, and plan for the future.
Wow, thank you, Seair. That was awesome. Aside from the really clever pun about you being midstream, I'm hearing the commitment to bringing people back to this place that is right in the middle of the city, and that is so awesome. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm excited for you to have question and answer with the audience later in this program. We are going to move north to the Laguna de Santa Rosa, and that is a big, beautiful body of water to the west of Santa Rosa. It's a great place for birding. So I'm curious, of those of you in the audience, can you raise your real hand or your Zoom hand if you've been birding at the Laguna? Oh, cool. I see a few hands up. Before I introduce our speaker, I just want to make the connection here between the two projects. There is some already a through line about how humans have changed the environment and how we are bringing humans back to the spaces that we love and care so much about. So this connection between open space and humans is coming up here. Okay, So I am really excited to introduce to you Anne Morkill. She's the executive director of the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation, and it is a nonprofit organization that conducts habitat restoration, conservation science, and environmental education in Sonoma County. So welcome Anne to the stage, and you can take it away.
Thank you. And hello, everybody out there in virtual worlds. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and a sense of place. The Laguna de Santa Rosa is in the heart of Sonoma County here in the North Bay area. It's also the largest sub-watershed to the Russian River watershed that starts up in Mendocino County and runs south and then west into Pacific Ocean at Jenner. And the Laguna de Santa Rosa itself is a 22-mile channel that starts very humbly in a pasture in Cotati and runs 22 miles north to the Russian River. It's also really, as I mentioned, the urban heart of Sonoma County. It encompasses, as you can see, most of the city of Santa Rosa, Rohnert Park, Cotati, Sebastopol, and Windsor, and then the unincorporated areas of Sonoma County. And just a quick introduction to the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation. As Jessica mentioned, we do habitat restoration and conservation science focused on riparian corridors and vernal pools on the Santa Rosa Plain, and also try to inspire the public to foster connection and contribute to that healthy environment within our watershed through environmental education, community education, and we also have a native plant nursery. The next slide, please. I wanted to give a little bit of context to the landscape change. The map displays what the vegetation is thought to look like in 1877 and what it was in 2020. The Laguna de Santa Rosa watershed falls within the unceded territory of the Southern Pomo and Coast Miwok people. And the diversity and productivity of the lands and waters that were centered around the Laguna, as you can see in the historic map, supported one of the densest populations of indigenous peoples in North America. And they had many as 100 seasonal encampments along the shores of the Laguna and its tributary creeks. It's been considerably altered, as you can see on the right, since the onset of intensive European American settlement in the region. And over the past 200 years, these land and water use modifications have resulted in approximately 60% decrease in wetland habitat and widespread habitat fragmentation. This has reduced the Laguna de Santa Rosa's ability to support biodiversity and other important ecological functions. And just want to point out on the right, the gray areas represent commercial and urban areas, residential areas, and rural neighborhoods within the city boundaries of the 5 cities that I mentioned. And also the pink and yellow represent cultivated crops, including vineyards and orchards, and the yellow is irrigated pasture land. So you can get a sense of what the use is like. And then most of the green, light and dark green areas are rural residential. Next slide, please. So with the changes to the watershed, there's been significant changes with altered water flow and sediment transport that's directly impacted the Laguna de Santa Rosa. On the left, these graphics from the San Francisco Estuary Institute kind of describe how historically sediment moved through the system. So on the east side of the Laguna is the Mayacamas and Sonoma Mountain. The streams coming out of those mountains flow into the Laguna de Santa Rosa. And in a lot of cases, some of these creeks actually ended at the plain and created this alluvial fan and then went into the groundwater. But today, with flood control, a lot of the creeks have been straightened and channelized and trapezoidal. And so a lot of the water flows through the mountains across the Santa Rosa Plain to the Laguna. And also in the early days, there were a lot of apple canneries and tanning factories and cities that dumped their waste into the Laguna itself. So it was actually in 1972 that the California Department of Fish and Game at the time declared the Laguna devoid of life. because of the reduced water quality and the reduced capacity of our natural wetlands to handle increased nutrient levels that came from agriculture and stormwater from the urban areas. Next slide, please. So this urbanization, conversion of lands to agriculture and residential areas, and then rerouting and channelizing the Laguna and its tributaries have led to a number of problems, such as this increased stormwater runoff and flooding, increased delivery and accumulation of fine sediment and the nutrients that are bound to the sediment. Introduction of invasive species, in particular, the top left is the water primrose or Ludwigia, which thrives in shallow, warm waters. And then, of course, the widespread habitat loss for native fish and wildlife species. And then with the future issues, current, I should say, and future issues with climate change, particularly with frequent droughts and the whiplash with flooding events. Next slide, please. But the Laguna de Santa Rosa today is still a really wonderful place, and hopefully you've experienced it yourself. We're lucky in that much of the 100-year floodplain that's immediately along the Laguna Channel is still very lightly developed and consists of primarily of public open space and also private working lands. So it still allows for the Laguna to function as an important flood retention basin during winter storms. And of course, this provides important habitat for wildlife. It's reported that the capacity of the Laguna de Santa Rosa floodplain is enough during a major storm that it can reduce the flood levels on the lower Russian River by 10 to 12 feet. And in fact, in times of high tide system, a big storm system, as well as high tide on the Russian River can actually back up into the Laguna, providing some bit of reprieve to the lower Russian River communities. Next slide. And of course, today it's still an important area for a diversity of wildlife that supports 200 species of birds. It's a major stopover for migratory waterfowl on the Pacific Flyway. And because of its importance for a wide array of terrestrial and aquatic wildlife, as well as for people for recreational purposes, passive recreation, kayaking, hunting, traditional gathering of tule and basket sedge, etc. It's a portion of the Laguna is recognized as a wetland of international importance. Next slide, please. So beginning in 2018, the Laguna Foundation partnered with the San Francisco Estuary Institute and Sonoma Water with support from California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Prop 1 grant to create a cohesive restoration plan. And it really builds on a lot of earlier planning efforts, and it synthesizes the best available knowledge of past, present, and potential future ecosystem conditions that are relative to both future land use and projected climatic conditions. The project is focused, as I mentioned, primarily on the Laguna within the 100-year floodplain, and includes conceptual designs for these 7 areas in the concept map on the right. And I'm going to highlight a priority project, the Lafranchi project, as well as talk a little bit about the concepts and the goals and objectives of the plan. So the objectives are to mimic the natural hydrograph in lands that drain into the Laguna, decrease stormwater velocity during storm events, decrease the sediment and nutrient delivery, especially those areas of high deposition, and enlarge riparian and wetland habitat patches to improve their connectedness, control the extent of invasive species, and then also improve the late spring and summer water quality through improved drainage and flow conveyance and habitat condition to support cold water fish such as coho and steelhead. Next slide, please. So the first project that we plan to implement, it's considered a high priority project for a number of reasons, is known as the Lafranchi project. It's about 5 miles upstream of the confluence with the Russian River. It's a 119-acre site that's been farmed for nearly 100 years, but as you can see in the inset photo between the historical and current, it's flooded for at least a few months every year. It lies right along the east bank of the Laguna de Santa Rosa. Sonoma Water completed the 65% design and CEQA documentation for this project, and Sonoma Ag and Open Space District purchased a conservation easement on this property. So we have an enthusiastic and willing landowner that's interested in supporting restoration. So this would include restoring a 3,200-foot reach of the Laguna Channel, moving it from what is a straightened channel on the west side to a slightly more meandering, shallow channel within the complex. It would also include reconnecting 2 east-west flowing tributaries to the Laguna, revegetate the project site with freshwater wetland species, and to connect the wetland habitat types to the tributaries that traverse the site. So this will have extensive benefits. And this is our first project that we'll be seeking implementation funds for, which Prop 4 would be a wonderful source of funding for that. Next slide, please. So for all the other project areas, this is an example of a 10% concept design where we looked at the historical vegetation, the current vegetation, and then came up with a conceptual design. This could be the next priority project. It's also about 100 acres, private property, and it has a conservation easement on it, and it would be restoring an historic lake, and again, provide important habitat for fish and wildlife. Next slide, please.
Thank you,
So
Anne.
in conclusion, all of these project concepts would result in 250 acres increase in riparian habitat, a similar amount in freshwater valley. And it really is going to rely on partnerships among all the land and water management agencies, private landowners, the Federated Indians of Great Manchuria. It'll require adequate funding for implementation, and it will be, Prop 4 will be an essential funding source to support our effort to realize our collective vision of a healthy, thriving, and resilient Laguna de Santa Rosa. Thank you.
That was, yeah, I'm like snapped something. That was amazing. Thank you. Well, I love how these projects are really showing what transformation can occur on the landscape. So what we can do and how we can reconnect our communities back to the land in so many different ways. And I know this is not a comedy show, but I do have to say that I noticed, and you mentioned that wildlife are really important to the space. And there was a picture of a couple of kids, and it's somebody who grew a love of nature in those various places, and hope to bring that to the next generation. I really appreciated that. So I also call my kids wildlife as well. But thank you. And with that, we are moving on to learn more about Audubon Canyon Ranch. Now, I immediately thought when I heard Audubon Canyon Ranch a few years ago that must be a specific place that you go to. But in this context, it is an organization that does work all over Sonoma and Marin counties. So today we're going to learn a little bit about Martin Griffin Preserve on the side of the Bolinas Lagoon. And I want to share that Audubon Canyon Ranch is partnering with a local environmental consulting firm, WRA, to implement several projects. We are really excited to have Janet Klein today, who works for WRA in partnership with Audubon Canyon Ranch. Janet is a conservation ecologist with tons of decades of experience creating collaborative opportunities for local resident and student participation in dialogue, stewardship, exploration, and research related to San Francisco Bay Area's public lands. She is the Community Resilience Director for WRA Environmental Consultants. Welcome, Janet.
Hi, thank you. So I'm really pleased to be here today to talk a little bit about Audubon Canyon Ranch and what they do. And for folks who are not familiar with Audubon Canyon Ranch, we just need to say it because of the name, that it is not the National Bird Organization. It's a local land stewardship and environmental education organization, although it does have very solid ties to birds, having run shorebird monitoring programs for decades. So as was just said, Audubon Canyon Ranch was founded in 1962. It has a staff of about 50 folks, and it's growing. It has an annual budget of $7 million that is underwritten by an endowment, as well as donations from its founders, donations from its large membership, foundation money, and then federal and state grant money, which is where this conversation around Prop 4 is so important. We have over 500 volunteers, have served over 300,000 students since its founding. We steward approximately 5,000 acres of land spread out through 25 properties in Marin, Sonoma, and Lake counties. Audubon Canyon Ranch has a new and really exciting and energetic strategic plan with the stated vision of a world where the diversity of life thrives and nature benefits all. And it has a renewed mission of connecting people, nature, and science for a more resilient world. So next slide, please. Audubon Canyon Ranch has actually been heavily impacted, I think, like all of us, by climate change already. During the 2017 Nuns Fire, which I think of as the first year that wildfire really affected me profoundly, personally, locking me in my home during those high smoke days, Audubon Canyon Ranch lost facilities at the Bovary Preserve near Glen Ellen. Historic structures that really supported and sustained a lot of its program. And then coincidentally, in the same year, Audubon Canyon Ranch also welcomed the Fire Forward program into its portfolio. And so the Fire Forward program is based on the idea that there is both bad fire, but there's good fire and essential fire to stewarding our lands in the American West. And that more than our government-funded fire departments can take the tool of fire into their hands and use it to revitalize our lands and protect ourselves from catastrophic wildfire events. So these two things happened in the same year: the establishment of the Fire Forward program inside of Audubon Canyon Ranch and the loss of some of its preserves. And I think it really helped the organization step back for a moment and focus and figure out where do they really need to commit going forward in the face of the scale of change in front of us. So if we could go to the next slide. So among the areas of focus that Audubon Canyon Ranch chose to really lean into was its land stewardship, and to really emphasize what are the lands that it holds, what is the work that needs to be done to take care of those lands and to contribute to a vibrant and vital San Francisco Bay Area. So this Stewart Creek Dam removal project is one example of Audubon Canyon Ranch focusing not on replacing historic structures, but really turning its energy towards creek revitalization and the restoration of historic fisheries. This is a really critical project that is underwritten by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then the other area that Audubon Canyon Ranch has really doubled down and renewed its commitment is relative to the cultivation of a next generation of stewards, of people who will know and care about the land that they live in. And so they've, again, refocused, re-strengthened their school's education program. And a lot of that funding and support to do so comes from grants like the Coastal Commission's Whaletail program. So if we go to the next slide. So if we look really specifically at Prop 4 and what's contained inside of that legislation and where those dollars go, I was really struck in preparing this presentation by the through line to almost all of the Audubon Canyon Ranch program areas. And so I actually opted, instead of talking just about the Martin Griffin Preserve, but to talk a little bit about everything that Audubon Canyon Ranch does. So within the Prop 4 funding legislation is $1.5 billion earmarked for wildfire preparedness, wildfire safety response, and it will provide a meaningful opportunity for Audubon Canyon Ranch to seek grant funding to further the Fire Forward program, particularly the apprenticeship program. Because contained within Prop 4 is funding for workforce development and job training. This very specifically earmarked for creating pathways for young people to earn a living wage, and fire-related careers is an opportunity to do that. At WRA, where I work, we've actually seen a back and forth exchange of entry-level staff coming into us as a consulting firm and then going to Audubon Canyon Ranch to receive Fire Forward training. And hopefully some of them will come back and kind of bring what they've learned back into, you know, WRI as a consulting business. We're also seeing those graduates spreading out around the state and providing leadership and bringing their skills of getting good fire on the land and working with community-based burn programs, like amplified. So it's really meaningful. Also within Prop 4 is $870 million related specifically to conservation and wildlife corridors, wildlife monitoring, and habitat restoration. Very specific to Audubon Canyon Ranch, one of the other programs in our portfolio is one called Living with Lions, which as we build more housing, as we expand into the urban wildland interface, people have more and more encounters with wildlife. And particularly in Sonoma County, we find that people who are moving from cities onto that urban edge, into that wildland area, encounter mountain lions or take care of their land in ways that might actually draw them in. And that having a very active education program, a monitoring program, gives people the opportunity to learn about lions and to not fear them and to make changes in their own behavior and their conduct that makes it possible for us to continue to live with a top predator, and to thrive. $700 million of Prop 4 will go specifically to underwrite access to nature. So these are programs that are going to build and support and enhance parks, like some of the presentations that we just saw, and also to provide, to underwrite and support education and transportation programs that help connect urban youth, inland youth, to coastal areas, to coastal parks. So Audubon Canyon Ranch has already been a recipient of this kind of funding, and its ability to continue to pursue those dollars and leverage them against grant funding and donations allows an experience like this, which was a kayak trip for local West Marin youth into Tamales Bay. It makes that kind of, with naturalists and scientists, makes that kind of experience possible. And then last but not least is the sea level rise adaptation funding that's tied to Prop 4. So it's $1.2 billion currently written into that legislation, and I believe 800 million of it specific to the San Francisco Bay Area. Can we go to the next slide, please? So Audubon Canyon Ranch, the Martin Griffith Preserve, and then this is a photo of the Cypress Grove Preserve are on shorelines in Marin County. Cypress Grove on Tamales Bay and the Martin Griffith Preserve on Bolinas Lagoon. And they are already experiencing and seeing the impacts of sea level rise. They're seeing shorelines erode. They're starting to see buildings being undermined and some of the infrastructure directly threatened by the accelerating pace of sea level rise. So a project that I'm involved in now, both as an Audubon Canyon Ranch trustee and as staff at WRA Environmental Consulting, is something that we're launching this fall, where we're going to actually look at the facilities in these shoreline preserves and ask how and at what pace is climate change impacting them, and bring that up against their historic maintenance requirements, their insurance costs, and then their programmatic ambitions around continuing to offer opportunities for the public and for youth to experience these amazing places. And we're going to kind of combine all of these things together and then work through some complicated and hard choices of where is the scale and pace of climate change starting to outstrip the ability of one small nonprofit to respond to and adapt to change, that level of change. And then I think more importantly, to look at where is their opportunity. Historically, when we think about climate change, people default to loss. And in working with the amazing staff at Audubon Canyon Ranch, we also see opportunity for wetlands and shoreline restoration. And so that's something that I'm really excited about. And so we can identify those opportunities, and Prop 4 and the funding within it will be essential to actually realizing those opportunities to maybe make a little lemonade out of sea level rise and restore some really critical habitats. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Janet. Is it too awkward to like applause on Zoom? I'll just do it for everybody, but thank you so much. That was so awesome. So now we have heard from Seair about the Petaluma River Park and from Anne about the work of Laguna de Santa Rosa, and now from Janet about all of the amazing things that Audubon Canyon Ranch is doing. I heard a lot of things, but one thing that's really coming up for me is about what kind of future ancestors we want to be, or what we want our region to look like in 100 years. And in each of these projects and collectively in the projects, what I hear is about taking the places as they are, bringing people and connecting people back to them, harnessing like and stewarding new generations of caretakers and stewards, and helping use all of those things to transform the land and how we connect to the land. So that is awesome. And I'm really excited about how Proposition 4 can be a down payment on that long-term work that we have ahead of us and how it can really transform the region. So now, as Janet said, I feel like I should just turn it back over to Janet maybe, but as Janet said, without Proposition 4 or other bonds like it, some of these projects really wouldn't be possible. And I also want to say that beside Proposition 4, these projects take a lot of capacity, organizational capacity, long-term operation and maintenance, and we need funding outside of Proposition 4 as well to help support that long-term care and taking of all of these places that we love. So with that, I'm going to open the conversation up to the audience. We're going to have a few minutes for question and answers. As Annie mentioned in the chat, if you have questions, or Annie and Laura, if you have questions you want to drop in the chat, please feel free to populate the chat with those now. You can also raise your hand and Michaela can help call on you, but I am going to start with this really fun question. And I'm going to start with, what is one thing that you wish the general public knew about what it takes to open a new park or take care of the parks or the natural lands that you and or your organizations are working on? So I don't know, maybe Sarah or Anne, do you want to start with that question?
Sure, I'll start. I think one thing that's really important is when we talk about conservation and protection of natural areas, it's not simply, the first step is sometimes is acquisition, but conservation is an ongoing activity. And it does require, sometimes it requires restoration where there's the ability to do it, bring back native plant species, but that stewardship and long-term management of these properties is so important. And that's what we really struggle with getting funding support for. And so it's not just designing and implementing, constructing projects, but the long-term commitment, not just by organizations like ours, but by the community to steward these areas. And that's why all the work that everyone has highlighted here is so important, of connecting the next generation to the land, so that they can be the future stewards.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Sarah, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me is just that, parks and our natural environment are for everyone, to everyone's benefit. And therefore, to truly succeed, it requires everybody to kind of pitch in, right, and to care and to tend to the degree that they can. So that requires, some of these big dollars signs that we see, that Prop 4 would bring, but that alone doesn't do it. It has to be a really intersectional effort of community members, from helping build the new Raptor box to, to other, individuals getting contributions, our corporate citizens needing to step up and take care of these places as well. And so it's kind of really is an all hands on deck effort. And that is why we, as it should be, I mean, for things that are so benefit and fundamental to just healthy life for all of us. So vote yes on Prop 4, but also, do your part.
One thing I love about this work, there's so many ways to participate. You can build a box, you can vote for Prop 4, you can help in stream restoration or the recent coastal cleanup day. There's just so many ways to participate, and it's on us to decide what works for us. So that's awesome. Janet, can I ask the next question to you? I feel like I know you're ready for this one. Of the different things that Prop 4 could fund, which one are you the very most excited about and why?
I am, well, one, I'm very excited about the project that we are doing with WRA. For me, the opportunity to take what is these abstract ideas around sea level rise that felt very far off, that are now immediate, and to combine like the technical expertise that's sitting inside of WRA, the hydrologists, the climate modelers, the habitat restorationists, and then marry it to the heart that I see inside of Audubon Canyon Ranch, where I see people who have been attached to that land for generations, where there is so much deeply personal and felt connection, and to work through together, like in partnership, these decisions. For me, it's an opportunity to kind of I don't want to say like test on a small scale, on an understandable scale, what's happening to us on a global scale, to kind of look at how do we make hard choices? How do we find opportunity? How do we triage? And how do we not just mourn change, but actually look for opportunities for a revitalized future? Like I think that that's very much possible, but it's going to take funding, and it's going to take a lot of funding. And so I see Prop 4 as being that opportunity to leverage, like the state funding is that essential element to leverage all of both the expertise, the heart, and the private funding opportunities that are going to be there.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I have a fun one. Where is your most favorite place to go outside in the North Bay? That can be in relationship to your day job, or otherwise somewhere in the North Bay, your most favorite place. And secretly, we might have a map of places to go. So we are going to take notes. Let's see. Seair, do you want to start with this one?
Yes. So I have to give a shout out to the Petaluma River. It is beautiful. As somebody that grew up in this town, and we might have made jokes out of the stinky slough that ran through our city, I've really come to understand what a kind of incredibly rare and amazing natural resource it is. And it's, and all of the, it might be smelly and muddy looking to the humans, but that means it's yummy and delicious and all the things that all of the critters need for it. So, getting on a kayak on the Petaluma River, getting out into the Baylands, the absolute stillness and beauty and calmness that you experience out there is really worth the trip. So I have to say that that's mine for today.
Thank you. Anne, do you want to share one?
It's really hard to pick any one area. I just love the land water interface. So whether it is, like Seair mentioned, I spent 8 years working in the Bay Area before coming up here to Sonoma County freshwater side on tidal work. So being on the edge of a tidal marsh and just the slow, quiet process that you see happening with tidal action. And then I just love the coast and just seeing the force of nature. I love being out there on storms in particular. I just love watching the power of nature, regardless of what we try to do to this earth, that nature still rules.
Oh, that is awesome. Yep. Ugh, how many times have I said awesome today? I'm going to use a different one. Janet, what's your response?
I'm anywhere on a kayak, like that. And it is that land water connection. That is just so amazing. I have a favorite place, actually. I mean, Richardson Bay. So even though Highway 101 is right there, the fact that you can be completely surrounded by development and condos and still stick your hand in the water and run them against the back of a leopard shark, is just astonishing to me, that you can like put in behind an elementary school in Mill Valley and have an experience like that.
Nature really, like animals, comment about the tiger shark, but it really is amazing how it can exist within such an urbanized context. It's pretty cool. More than awesome.
Leopard shark.
I'm
I would
sorry,
never
leopard
touch a
shark,
tiger
not
shark.
tiger shark.
Never touch a tiger shark.
Big cat shark. Sorry. Well, okay, last question. What is something that is giving you hope? Who wants to start with that one? That's a big question, but it could also be a short answer.
I'll go because I'm sitting here today actually in a hotel lobby outside of the San Mateo Climate Summit. And last week I got to attend the 30 by 30 Summit. And what has blown me away at both of them is just the breadth and the diversity of people who are doing this work. And it has changed so much in my lifetime. I am approaching the age of calling myself an elder in this space, and seeing just the people that I am meeting now, the younger folks, their perspective, their energy, the backgrounds that they bring to the table. It is very hopeful. It is very affirming.
Thank you, Janet. Seair, Anne, what's bringing you hope?
I was going to say ditto. The new generations that are coming up, it's really exciting here working with, interns from Santa Rosa Junior College or Sonoma State, some of our young employees, and thinking about kind of where I was at that point in time and in my career 35 plus years ago. It brings a lot of hope because there's so much passion and so much energy around what they see as their future and their responsibility. I think that's a lot of it too, is that they take responsibility for the natural world and their role in action. So
Thank you. Seair, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Sure. I mean, I very much agree with Janet and Anne's. It really is the future generations. It's everybody on this call. It's, the folks rallying around. But I will give a more practical tip too. I feel when I'm feeling stuck or frustrated, travel, just kind of going literally anywhere. It could be Manhattan or the mountains of Tennessee or Costa Rica, or getting outside of your normal and then just seeing the kind of infinite ingenuity of humans and nature. And it makes you remember that things aren't stuck the way that they are, that everything around us is our imagination of things that we've created in terms of the built environment. And so we can eat just as we've imagined the place we're in now. We can imagine a new world in which we are not the overlords of nature, but moving more towards a symbiotic relationship as we know is possible. So we can get there.
I think it's beautiful to close the question and answer session with infinite ingenuity.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have to say, I feel really lucky to work with all of you and work in the Bay Area. And thank you for everything that you're doing. And with
Likewise.
that, I am going to turn it over to Annie Burke.
Thank you so much. And please, everyone, join me in thanking Anne, Janet, and Seair again for their presentations today and their time today and telling their stories. Also for all of the work that they're doing on a daily basis, along with their colleagues and partners to do work for all of us, projects that benefit all of us. So thank you. And please join me in the chat or Zoom hands or real hands, however you feel so moved to express your gratitude. I'm really, really grateful for all three of you. As we wrap up, I want to say again that Prop 4 is a really important investment that we need to make as a state to prevent the disasters that climate change is making today. And it's money we're spending now because the costs are only going to go up. And so not only are will Prop 4 help prevent disasters in the future, it also provides some real tangible benefits today. As we've heard today, there's places that we can all go to both put our hands in the water, as well as feel reconnected to ourselves and to something much bigger than ourselves. So we encourage you to vote yes on Prop 4, and we encourage you to encourage your friends and family and neighbors to do the same. We also invite you to join us again, same time, different channel, but same time next Tuesday for a second showcase of solutions. And we'll be next week, we'll be focused on projects in the Central Bay, which we're defining as kind of San Francisco and the East Bay. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be doing the same thing for the South Bay. So we hope that we'll see you again. Thank you so much for coming. We're really glad that you were here, and vote yes on Prop 4. Have a great rest of your afternoon.